I think we've got most people here, so we might just kick off, and we want to just say a massive thank you to Sam, who is going to share a little bit of her knowledge and skills around coaching with us today, which will be having a little listen to some of the things she has to say, and then a little bit of an activity, I think, Sam,
yes.
towards the end. I'll kick us off with okay. Kia hora, te marino, kia whakapapa, ponamu, te moana, hei hurahi, mā tātou i te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou. Omie, huie, taike. Thank you. So, we've still got a few people popping in, it looks like. But just want to, again, thank Sam. This is going to be really interesting. And I'll preface it, and I'm sure Sam will say it throughout, that coaching is quite a big topic to cover in just one session. But it'd be really lovely to hear some bits and pieces, and Sam's also got some coaching workshops that are available at ANS. So if you're interested, you can always pop along to those another time. Cool. Sam, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Cool. I'll start. Okay, so just to get you thinking about this, hang on, I want to go in slideshow. Can you all see it now? I've put it in slideshow.
Yes.
Cool. So just to get you thinking about why coaching is an important thing to consider, I just, in your groups or on your own, think of a time where you've provided some kind of AAC implementation support, and you've gone via the medium of a workshop or a training session. It might just be a one-off workshop, or it might be a little series, and you did a great job. You provided clear information. The workshop was well received. Everyone looked like they were listening and they were happy. There was some aha moments. And then, frustratingly, it never really got going. Anyone identify with that situation? I can only see Fern, but she's nodding. Yes, there's a hand up from Jun. Well, this has definitely been my experience many times. When I was working at Pat Av School, I used to run workshops for the teacher aides there, and honestly, they seemed to go so well that it was incredibly frustrating when a couple of weeks later I'd be going around and just no one, or hardly anyone, seemed to be doing what they had planned to do in the workshop. So that's sort of a background to why coaching might be something to consider when you are working with AAC. So before I go on, I just want to give a big shout out to my doctoral supervisors, Sally, Tara and Liz, because they have been a really big part in my research, and my research is what underpins what I'm going to tell you about today. So I'm going to be really brief about this because I know quite a few of you have already listened to my webinar about my study, but I'm just going to quickly give you an outline for those of you who don't know what my doctoral research was about, so that you can see why I'm such a big fan of coaching. So I had 6 families who had preschool children who were not talking or were saying very little, who I studied for a year. And the mums from each of the families came on 4 group workshops, but the group workshops were always followed up by coaching in the home environment. So whatever they learned in the workshop was then followed up on by a coaching session in the home environment. That's all the data collection. I don't need to go into that. And that took about 9 weeks. And after that, they carried on having coaching once every 2 months at home until a year was over. So that's where a lot of my information about coaching now comes from. It's from that piece of research. And I want to just point for those of you that don't know, what happened during that year was that the parents did learn the strategies and they learned to use them in a really skilled way. And they were quite a diverse group of parents. And they maintained using those AAC strategies over the whole year. And then their children, who were using a core board as part of this study, all 6 children used the core board. Some of them used it incredibly skillfully to put like 3, 4, 5 symbols together at a time. And 4 of the children started talking a lot more than they had before the study. And the feedback I got from the parents in the final interview was that the coaching was the real key as to why it had been such a success. So that's kind of the background to my thoughts about coaching now. And I mean, before doing that piece of research, I had experience of coaching because I was a Hanen trained therapist. And so I had run Hanen courses and I had done coaching, but I would have to say, I was never really that comfortable with the coaching aspect of Hanen. I always found it difficult. I didn't feel like I really knew what I was doing, but I've really sort of honed my thoughts about coaching since then. So let's move on to thinking about those experiences you've got where you've done workshops or you've done training and they haven't really worked out. They haven't been enough for people to take up the AAC. So this might be a one-off training or a 2-off or a 3-off. It doesn't really matter. The problem with doing training for AAC, well, just training and not having a coaching approach, is that you're dealing with some really complex skills that people need to learn when they're supporting AAC, skills that are quite hard to learn. And at the time that you deliver a workshop, it's often at the beginning of AAC implementation, and quite a lot of what you might be talking about might not actually feel relevant to the people that you're talking to, because they haven't actually had the experience of trying to use the AAC. They haven't used it in different parts of their life. And so what you're telling them is just going to be bouncing off because it's too much information and it doesn't feel relevant to them right at that moment. And it's going to be complex. It's too complex to deal with in a workshop situation or a one-off training. But the main thing that's going to be the problem is that training doesn't give people opportunities to practice. And some of you might be going, aha, but we did role plays. And there definitely is benefits to role plays, although I don't think anybody who's ever done a role play has said that they thought there was a benefit, but there is a benefit to role plays, but it's not practicing the skills in real life situations with the children they're going to be supporting. And so it's not quite as meaningful as, or it's nowhere near as meaningful as that. So this is just a very brief overview of why training might not be successful in AAC. And I probably just need to repeat now, as Fern said at the beginning, that coaching is, the more I think about coaching and the more I've researched about coaching and the more I've done coaching, the more I realise it's incredibly complex and it really takes time. And trying to tackle it in a quick situation like this is really just going to scratch the surface. It's something that does take time and practice, just like learning to use AAC actually. Okay, so here's a little overview of some things that you might want to think about if you're thinking of using a coaching approach when you are implementing AAC. I think especially as speech language therapists, there are some things that are so second nature to us, or that we've practiced so much that we think they are second nature to everyone. We think that they're easy, that they don't need explaining. Something that an example I can give you of that is that I've done so many people games in my life. I've done so many sort of row your boats and ready, steady, goes that I actually think people are born knowing how to do people games. But then when I did some training for some teacher aides at Pat Ave about people games and then sent them off to go and do the people games, I realised that although people games do seem to be quite second nature for some people, that for other people they're really complicated and they really need it breaking down and explaining. And I think most of the skills and strategies that we need people to do when they're implementing AAC, none of it is all obvious or easy if you're not a speech language therapist. So don't assume that they know what something means, that they know what modelling is, or any of those sort of those skills. They're going to need them breaking down into small steps. So that's my next point. Break it. Think of the strategies that you want them to learn, and then think about what were the steps that you had to use to learn that strategy. Break them down into manageable steps and explain them really well. I think there's another tendency, especially if we're time poor, to just throw everything at once at people and expect them to learn all the different AAC skills and strategies in one go so that they can make it all work perfectly. But that's really too hard for the majority of people. So look at the situation that you're in. Look at what one thing that might be manageable for them and stick to that. Just coach on that at first. And even if it's really frustrating you that there's other things that they could be doing, just hang off and try to do one things at a time. Because generally, I think when people are learning to use AAC, they are feeling, communication partners are generally feeling quite scared. They are feeling underconfident. They're worried they're going to do something wrong. They don't know how to do it. They might be people who are very competent in other aspects of their life, and that feeling is very uncomfortable. And so a lot of the problems that you might see when you're doing AAC implementation, a lot of the sort of roadblocks that you might come across, where you think, oh, the team's just not on board, they don't want to do it. It's often when you dig down, it's that lack of confidence. They're scared. And so what you want to do is sort of build up their confidence and make them feel like it is achievable. So on the same theme, it can often help to just focus on one activity that's manageable. So even though we know that AAC is for everything, you want them to be doing it all day, every day. Realistically, that's just going to scare the life out of people. So when you're first coaching someone for AAC implementation, try to focus on one activity that's an activity that they feel quite confident with and that you feel that they will have some success with. And then plan together what your coaching session is going to look like. Plan what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And get them to have a backup activity, because as we all know, for those of us who work with children, you might plan the most fantastic activity you could ever think of and you know they're going to love it, and then you get there and they don't want a bar of it. So you want to make sure you've got a backup. Okay, so has anyone got any questions so far? It's so weird doing these kind of things because all I can see is Fern and Lauren, is it? And so I can't tell what anyone's thinking and whether they think this is any use whatsoever. So if you've got any questions or anything while we're doing this, just stick your microphone on and shout it out to me, because it's quite comforting to actually hear that there's other people there.
You're getting some thumbs up, Sam.
Sorry?
You're getting some thumbs up. So you.
Oh, good. Okay. Good, thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is think about, well, what actually is coaching? Oh, Lauren's got a question.
Sorry, that was a mistake. I was trying to give you a thumbs up, but I pressed to raise my hand.
I got quite excited there. But thanks for the thumbs up.
But I will send the thumbs up now.
Thank you. Okay, so let's have a think about what coaching is. And honestly, there are so many different definitions of coaching, but I do think it does get really misused. I think people sometimes say, oh, I've been doing coaching, when actually what they've just been doing is telling someone what to do. Or they'll say, oh, I used coaching, but what they mean is they had them in a room on a one-to-one. So there are some things that really define coaching and make it the practice that can really change how people do things. So here are some of the more common coaching practices that you might see. Obviously, you're going to start with some relationship building and scene setting. there's usually an element of observation. You're usually going to watch the person that you're coaching do the skill, do the strategy, do what they practiced, do what they prepared and said they were going to practice. You might choose to do some demonstration as well if you feel like they need to see the strategy being used again. You might do some direct teaching. But these asterisked ones are the ones that have been shown to have the most, lead to the most change in other people's practice. So those top ones are nice to have, but these bottom ones are the ones that lead to change. So some element of coachee practice with feedback. So that means you are watching the communication partner have a go at using the strategies that you've told them about, and you are going to give them some feedback on how that's going. Very similar to that is guided practice with feedback. That really just means that you're kind of doing it together. So you're with them, you're doing the strategies alongside them, but you're also narrating what you're doing and giving them feedback on how they're going. And you might choose to slightly sort of withdraw what you're doing as time goes on and they get more confident, and then just lead to giving them feedback. There's usually some element of problem solving and reflection during a coaching session as well. So one of the main aims of coaching is that you build up the communication partner's ability to reflect on their practice themselves and have a think about what they were doing and how it went and what differences it made. Because the more someone can reflect on their own practice, the less dependent they're going to become on you for feedback, which means that you won't need to coach them for forever. Okay, so I don't find coaching terribly easy. I am someone who is a bit of a control freak. I like to know what's going to happen before I do it. I'm very much a planner. And one of the things that really freaks me out about coaching is you can't really plan for everything with coaching. It is you really don't know how it's going to go. That you can, I don't think any coaching session I've ever done has ever turned out the way I hoped it was going to turn out. It's just there's so many potential curveballs. And the photo on this slide is one of the participants in my research. The mum's called Cara and the child's called Adeline. And this is a coaching conversation. So we've done the observation, which didn't go terribly well because Adeline did not like situations where she felt she was being watched. And I'm desperately trying to think on the spot of how to manage the coaching session and come up with some good supportive feedback and some interesting reflective questions. And I've just thought of something good, and it's honestly, I find it quite hard to think of good reflective questions. I really am not good at this on the spot. I've come up with a good one. I say it and I'm pleased. I'm like, yes, that's going to get her thinking. And at that moment, Adeline climbs onto Cara's back, and Cara's completely distracted because Adeline wants to play horsey. So I think that's one of the hardest things about coaching, particularly if you're doing it with children. If you're going to do some element of observation, then you're going to have the child around, which makes the coaching conversation incredibly difficult. So that's something that you have to sort of work through. So some of the things that I found difficult in terms of using coaching for AAC is that it's a time heavy practice. You need to make time to have one-on-one time with someone and really get into a good relationship and conversation. It's not something that can really be rushed, and making time is difficult both for parents who are often have got lots of competing demands, but also within school environments as well, because you may have planned to do some coaching with a teacher aide. You turn up, they're a teacher aide down in the class. The teacher's like, no way can I spare that teacher aide now. So just making the time can be tricky.
And that,
yeah, go for it.
Just in the stuff I did in early childhood, that was something that they really commented on, is that they felt that coaching, so we did video coaching, And they felt that real-time coaching on the floor in an early childhood centre just wouldn't have worked for them. They wouldn't have been able to have concentrated, and that having time away to be reflective off the floor was critical. So that managerial support within that centre to take those teachers off the floor to be able to reflect was a really critical part of them getting a lot out of it.
Yeah. And as time went on with the parents in my research study, I increasingly encouraged them to have the video prepared ahead of time, because that way we could make childcare arrangements. But in reality, that was very difficult for parents to do. They couldn't manage to video themselves doing their practice quite a lot. Quite often they were doing it on their own, and they just didn't feel like they had the hands free. So that comes under logistics, really, the sort of logistics of juggling the child, the observation. It really does help if you have some video to look at. And in my current job now for TalkLink, I do often ask teams to try and get some video for me in between training visits, so that we've got something to look at. It's such an easier way to run a coaching session if you've got an observation that's there on a video. As much as possible, try and stick to the plan. So if you're running, usually when you're running a coaching session, you're not doing it on the hoof. You've not just suddenly turned up and said, hey, let's do coaching. You've usually made a plan, an action plan, where they know what they're going to be practicing and they know what they're going to be observed on, and then they know what strategies they're focusing on too. And as much as possible, it really helps if you can stick to the plan. Coaching skills take time to learn and hone, and I definitely haven't nailed it yet. I really struggle with not talking too much and not seeing. I'm really bad at immediately seeing what the problem is and wanting to fix it, and that's really not what coaching is about. It's about trying to get them to be a much more active partner in that. There's a large element of relationship building, and early coaching sessions with people can be much more sort of nervous and avoidant than later coaching sessions where they know you, they know what the format is, and suddenly being observed isn't scary anymore because they know you're not coming in there to criticize them and that it's going to be a two-way discussion. So that takes a bit of time. And curveballs, especially when you're working with children, are just constant. 10 minutes after this photo on the right, a terrible smell came through from the kitchen because she had been cooking dinner and had completely forgotten about it and it burned. So, you know, there's just so much that can happen when you're working with busy people who are supporting children to use AAC. There's so much going on. So that's some of my pitfalls. Yes.
Ileana's put a question in the chat and she said, how do you approach adults who don't like to be on videos?
Yeah, that is tricky.
One thing, can I just share something that we do at school, is we'll get them to video us first and then coach. They help us to coach us on what we've done. And then we kind of do now. It's so they get the opportunity. We have to be vulnerable first, and that sometimes helps. Yeah.
Cara in this picture absolutely loathed being videoed at first, but she did it because it was part of the research. But by the end, she was completely oblivious to it. It's definitely something you get desensitized to. I think for people who are really anxious about it, they're the ones that can benefit from doing it in their own time rather than having you be there with a video camera, because that's like a double observation, really. You're there in the moment, there's a pressure to perform and you're videoing, whereas if they can just wait till they're in a really good situation and things are going well and then just press play if they can get some kind of stand for their video, but there will be the odd person who refuses to be videoed, and then you're probably going to have to observe them in the moment and give feedback while they are practicing the strategies, which is, I find, much harder. It's really nice. Video gives you as the coach time to pause and think and look at it together, and quite often people who are being coached, when they're watching their videos back, will come out with a load of the feedback that you were going to give them for themselves, so it saves you having to do it and makes them much more empowered. Now, this is a really simple coaching model and it's not going to change much. So I don't want to go overboard with plugging my workshops, but I do run 2-day workshops where I introduce a much more complex model than this. But there's no way I've got time to do that here. But this is something that you could use that would be an alternative to simply bombarding people with information in a quick information sharing session. So what you could do here, so you would, first of all, you would have to spend a bit of time observing the person or talking to the communication partner about how they're supporting AAC currently. What skills have they got and what are they struggling with? Because you need to know what strategy is going to be the most helpful in this situation. So you pick on something that you think might change their practice. It might be that you'd consider thinking about a particular people game that might engage the child. And then you would demonstrate it. So this is another situation where you might need to have the child present, or you could role play it in front of them if you're feeling brave. So you have the strategy, you think, oh, I think that AAC is going to work really well first off if they are swinging the child on the swing and doing ready, steady, go, and then they're stopping the swing. I'm going to demonstrate that. I'm going to show them what it looks like. And then you move on to guided practice with feedback, where you sort of turn around and go, hey, why don't you have a go? And you stand there with them and you support them through it, and you go, oh, just give them a few more turns. Yeah, I could see he was getting irritated there. And you give them some feedback and you sort of step back as much as you can and let them have a go at using the strategy themselves. Or it might be the strategy of modelling and you're just getting them to model a few symbols while the child's eating, something like that. Then you need to have 5-10 minutes away from the child so that you can concentrate. Well, you know, ideally this would be more than 5-10 minutes, but if you're really time poor, then just 5-10 minutes to reflect on how that went. Were there any problems? Is there anything they need to change? How do they feel about that? And then you spend the next 10 minutes doing a bit of joint planning. Okay, so let's think about how often you're going to do that over the next week or two. Are there any other activities you could bring in that are similar? And that's like the whole little coaching cycle in one go. That's not going to change the world, but it might be better than an information dump. So, yeah. Okay. So one of the things that you saw in that model was giving feedback. It's an important part of coaching. Let's have a think about what sort of feedback you give. So this is another thing that I struggle with. My feedback tends to often consist of, oh my God, that was brilliant. That is not ideally the way that you give feedback. You want it to be specific. You want it to be grounded in the data. You want them to know exactly what it was that they did that made a change and was positive. So the sort of cheerleading stuff sets you up with a problem for if you then need to give some more constructive feedback, because it will be very obvious that they did well or they didn't do well. Whereas if you always sort of keep your tone quite neutral and like, oh, when you stopped and waited there, I noticed that, you know, that kind of thing. So specific, it's connected to the action plan goals. They were going to be practicing modeling. So that's what you're commenting on. I noticed that you modeled the word more 4 times during that activity, that kind of feedback. It's objective. And it's grounding the data from your observation, which is easier if you've got a video to base it on. And non-attributive means not the cheerleader style thing. So instead of you did great, you would want to say something like you picked an activity that she really likes and then you modeled the symbol for more 3 times. So there's a really specific piece of feedback. And then you might want to link it to the effect it had on the child. This is a real rush, by the way. So I'm sorry if this is an information dump on a complex topic. So if you remember very little about it, I don't blame you. So something else that little coaching model had was problem solving. And this is something that often will be some problems when you're implementing AAC. I can almost guarantee it. Everything will not go as planned. So again, you don't want to rush in to solve the problem, which is what I usually do. You want to identify what it is. What actually is the problem? Do we have the same understanding of the problem as each other? Don't rush to solve it. Start to think about, well, do you remember when this happened when you were, the more you have a coaching relationship, the more you're going to be able to draw on previous experiences. If you've got a video, that's going to be really useful because you can look at what happened before the problem came about. What do we think led to the problem? Ask some probing questions, and if they're still completely stuck, solve it collaboratively. They should come out of the process feeling like they had an important part in solving the problem. I'm rushing a bit because I want you to have time to do the activity. Okay, so another key component of coaching is having an action plan so that the person knows what they're practicing and what they're going to be observed on. And you set your goals together. You write them down together. It feels like a collaborative process so that they're very clear exactly what they're working on, and it's specific, it's measurable. We're talking SMART goals here. And you're getting them to think about, how many times am I going to do this? Let's be realistic. I'm a very busy person. I'm not going to do it all day, every day. Let's think about when I will do it so that they feel like their success. And you want a goal for the communication partner as well as the child. Okay, so that was a lot. And I want you to just have the very first inkling of what it might feel like to put that into. Okay, that is the quickest introduction to coaching. It isn't a topic that really lends itself well to bombarding with information like that. But if anyone has any feedback now from their thoughts about what they might talk to Cara about, be brave. There's nothing wrong.
We sort of talked about how we might acknowledge that she had like a really motivating activity, that Adeline was really engaged, and that she was saying a lot of core words as part of that activity, and that we might ask a reflective question around, we noticed that there was a lot of there was a use of verbal prompting. You used 3 verbal prompts, I think it was. And is there anything about that you would change? Maybe.
Someone has got a background noise that sounds like Stephen.
Sorry. We've got drumming happening outside.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, yeah, well, Fern is a very experienced coach, so that was pretty much a perfect answer, but there are lots of other answers that are just as good too. If anyone wants to put them in the chat or be brave and unmute yourself. Come on, Sean, I can see you looking brave.
Hi, Sam. I was actually just typing in the chat. We were talking more about like the reflective questioning of like, yes, it was a really motivating and engaging, but perhaps the placement of where she had the toy may have impacted her ability to model during the activity. Because the toy was in the middle of the thing to model, and then perhaps a reflective question around if she was establishing that activity next time, because she's on shag carpet, probably wouldn't have worked on shag carpet, but perhaps maybe setting up the environment so that she could model more easily and have the activity going on.
Yes, and I also wondered about the placement of the actual core board, because Adeline's got some physical impairments that you might have noticed, so it was actually quite effortful for her to get to the core board. Anyone else want to make a comment? Okay,
Sorry, Sam.
Yep, no, go for it.
Just kind of thinking about environments, if you're working in like a special school or in schools in general where you might be needing to upskill more than one adult. I just did some stuff around group coaching. So we took 3 early childhood educators in one centre. You need to be a bit careful around like the trust relationship between those people. Like I wouldn't put 3 people in the room that maybe don't like each other very much, or where there's beef in the background or what have you. But certainly for like teams in like a satellite unit or in a classroom or something like that, where you can get people together and they can be supporting each other with videoing and things like that. What I found by the end of the 10 weeks is that I was becoming a little bit redundant, because they were starting to coach each other and saying things like, oh, I really like how you waited after you asked that question to see what the child did, or I really noticed that when you used this strategy that changed how the child responded. So and there's some really good research around doing that in some of things in the UK, that you can utilize group coaching. You just need to have some tikanga around that in the beginning. So I did a thing where we had to agree mutually on not going around the centre and saying, you never believe what Shirley said in the session or whatever, so that there's that trust there. But that, you know, sometimes coaching an adult one-on-one is not particularly possible due to time, but you can do it in groups.
Yeah.
Small groups, I would say.
Yes, small, definitely, because some people won't talk if there's more than 3 or 4 people in a group, if you're a bit of an introvert.
And your skill as the coach is actually then to make sure that everybody reflects, which can sometimes be tricky if you've got a really chatty one and quite a reserved one.
Yeah, definitely. Has anyone got any questions or comments they want to make?
Juliana has her hand up.
Yep.
I was just wondering, would you use, I've seen like, say, for example, the fly spatters used to bring attention to the child to the specific symbol on the code. If it's an early communicator and you just introduce a very busy code and it's on the ground, would you use strategies to bring attention to the symbols?
No, I haven't. I usually try and match. If I feel like attention to the core board is a problem, I would usually try and match what I'm modeling to the exact thing the child's probably thinking. So I'd use this strategy that I call targeted modeling, where I'm really trying to match my models to the child's focus of interest. If they've got real problems with figure ground and being able to look at symbols, I might consider a masked core board.
Yeah,
that's
thank
just
you
me.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else?
I think that's that was so great. Thank you, Sam. I think you really covered some amazing things in a really short period of time. So really appreciate you giving up your time. And I know Atan's sent out an email recently again around your coaching workshop. So definitely look that up if you're interested. And we will close the karakia.
Before we close, just a reminder to please add our mail address to your safe list so that it doesn't go into spam, or check the AAC group Facebook group where we always post out these events too.
So you've got it available. Awesome. So Sam, there's just a question here. It says, just wondering if you have you seen it?
Just said that's a big one. Maya, come on my 2-day workshop. We'll tackle that in a lot of detail. I don't think I can answer it in the short time we've got left. I'm really sorry. That's a big topic.
Awesome. Well, we will just here we are. Okay, we will finish off with our karakia. Kia whakaria te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia taruki whakataha ai, kia taruki whakataha ai. Homie, huie, tai kie. Awesome. Thank you all so much. Always lovely to see you all. And we'll see you in term 3. Ka kite.